Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Over the past few days, we've been telling you about layoffs and gloomy predictions for the job market. Tonight, we begin with a positive story. Indian stock markets are ending the year with a bang. With the total value crossing $4 trillion, India is being called a stock market superpower. We'll bring you the numbers and the trends. Also discuss how India practices strategic autonomy. Look at the war in Gaza. Over the past few weeks, Prime Minister Modi has been speaking to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Iranian President Raisi and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, regional rivals and enemies, but all of them are India's partners. We'll discuss how this works. And speaking of partners, Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar is in Russia. He said the India-Russia relationship is the only constant in world politics. In Pakistan, a former foreign minister has been dragged to jail. The pictures are dramatic and telling. Can you imagine the next Football World Cup without Brazil? We'll tell you why that's a possibility. Argentina is laying off thousands of government employees. Do governments do that? Why Intel is investing $25 billion in Israel in the middle of a war? Why Mexico is going the Pakistan way? Did Zambia's minister try to sell national assets to China for a Mercedes-Benz? And can Taylor Swift save Joe Biden? We'll explain the headlines first. Israel's army chief warns that the Gaza war will last many more months. He says Israel is fighting on 7 fronts and has hit back on 6. His statement comes as 18 missiles were fired from Israel towards Israel from Lebanon. China issues a new warning to military enthusiasts, says stop posting photos of military equipment or face jail term. Beijing says photos of sensitive equipment online could endanger its national security. Russia says its oil revenue is back at 2021 levels. Moscow claims that majority of oil exports were redirected from Europe to India and China, says a lot of countries want Russian oil despite sanctions. India records more than 500 new COVID cases in a day. The country's active infection count is more than 4,000 now. The new surge in Wuhan virus cases is fueled by the JN1 variant. State governments have urged caution and constant monitoring. Parasite star Lee Sun-kyun dies at the age of 48. The South Korean actor was under investigation over illegal drug use. Police say the cause of death could be suicide. And the Eiffel Tower is closed. The staff has gone on strike over the way it is managed. The Eiffel Tower is one of the world's biggest tourist attractions. More than 7 million people visit the Paris landmark every year. India is being called a stock market superpower. Indian companies are ending 2023 on a high. There's a bull run in the stock markets. If you club all publicly listed companies in India, they're worth more than $4 trillion and mostly part of 2 exchanges, the Bombay Stock Exchange or BSE and the National Stock Exchange or NSE. Thousands of companies are listed on these exchanges and they're having a dream run. There is big money flowing into Indian markets. Indian companies have become more valuable. And how do you assess that? Through a company's market value. And what's that? The total value of all the shares of a company. Say there's a company called XYZ. One share of XYZ sells at 10 rupees and the company has issued 100 shares. So 100 shares will be worth 1,000 rupees. That's the market cap of XYZ. But if you want to buy this company XYZ, the price tag is 1,000 rupees. And when I say the Indian stock market is worth $4 trillion, it basically means the total value of all publicly listed shares is $4 trillion. Out of this, 1 trillion has been added in the last 3 years. So India is now part of an exclusive club. Indian stock markets are among the biggest in the world and Indian companies among the most valuable. Here's what the pecking order looks like. The Americans are right at the top. US stocks are worth more than $50 trillion, 50 trillion. China comes next. It's worth over $10 trillion. Japan, $6 trillion. The Hong Kong market around $4.56 trillion. And finally, we have India at $4.16 trillion. Now, this is an important milestone. India has touched the $4 trillion mark. for the first time. And the bull run is not over yet. Hong Kong's position is under threat. Indian companies are closing in fast. The Hong Kong market, as you would know, is in turmoil. It fell by 17% this year, all thanks to Xi Jinping and his erratic policies. And this trend is not set to reverse anytime soon. So Hong Kong will continue to sink, and India could surpass Hong Kong and become the fourth biggest stock market in the world. Which brings us to the next questions. What is working for India? What is driving this bull run? Broadly, there are two factors. Number one, the surge in investment from overseas. These are foreign institutional investors, or FIIs. They could be independent investors or large organizations like the international mutual funds, pension funds, or investment groups. Basically, the big money bags. Do you know how much they've invested in India? By December, FIIs had poured in around $18 billion into the Indian markets. They're making steady purchases. And why are they bullish on India? Because of the resilience of the Indian economy. That's the second factor. India is outperforming its global peers. In the last quarter, India reported a growth of 7.6%, which is way better than expectations. 7.6%. The earlier estimate was 6.5% by India's central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, or RBI. They'd expected 6.5%. India clocked 7.6%. So the overall trend is looking good. Inflation has been largely contained. It has dropped below the 5% mark. Industrial production is high. In October, it rose by over 11%, which is a 16-month high. And the trajectory looks good. Indian stock markets are benefiting from that. Good growth is good for business, plus leading markets are delivering sluggish returns. For example, returns from US bonds have dropped below 5%. What about US stock markets? They delivered a return of 6%. And how did China perform? Chinese stocks gave a modest return of 2.7%. Compare that to India. This year, Indian stocks have delivered returns of more than 10%. The numbers speak for themselves. This is why India is being called a stock market superpower. How do you summarize India's foreign policy? In two words, strategic autonomy. Be flexible, put yourself first, and don't sign up for bloc politics. That is India's stated policy. It's been tested multiple times in the last few years. First, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and now during the Gaza war. Let's focus on the latest test. Yesterday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, aka MBS. They discussed three major issues. One, that of terrorism, violence and civilian deaths. Two, that of a two-state solution. And three, maritime security. Prime Minister Modi called for more aid shipments to Gaza. He also agreed to work together for peace and stability. So that's Saudi Arabia done. Last week, the Prime Minister spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Again, he called for humanitarian aid shipments, also for an early and peaceful resolution of the conflict. So that's Israel done. Then last month, Prime Minister Modi had spoken to Ibrahim Raisi, the president of Iran. Once again, the message was the same: support the two-state solution, stop the escalation, and send humanitarian aid. So that's all three stakeholders in the region done: Israel, the Arab world, and Iran. How many countries can do that? And it's not just about reaching out, it's also about keeping all sides happy. When the Hamas attack happened, India was among the first to react. No half measures, a full-throated condemnation. That's what India did. But when Israel carpet-bombed Gaza, India scaled back. It joined calls for a ceasefire. And neither side is complaining. With Iran too, India has been measured. Just look at what happened over the weekend. A ship heading to India was attacked in the Arabian Sea. The US pointed fingers at Iran. They said Iran was behind the attacks. But Tehran said, don't blame us. Now, this was tricky for India. On one side, an attack just outside India's sovereign waters. On the other, a close partner. That is Iran. So what did New Delhi do? First, an investigation was ordered, then warships were deployed, and finally, the Defense Minister of India issued a stern warning. He did not name any country, but his message was quite clear. He said those responsible will be held accountable. So clearly, India is not taking sides, which brings us to the most important question. What are India's priorities here? What are the factors behind the current policy? Number one, India's own national interest. That always comes first. We buy a lot of oil from Arab countries in West Asia, like Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Iraq. You can't just abandon that overnight. Not when inflation is so sticky. And that's always been the top priority for New Delhi, getting the best deals for its people. Also part of national interest is maritime safety. India uses the Suez Canal a lot. Around 20% of our trade passes through here. So New Delhi sent warships, not one or two, but 3 of them. We haven't joined the US-led Red Sea coalition, but we have the same goals, to keep the Red Sea trade routes safe. That's what India is doing. Factor number 2, a realization of its own limits. And to explain this, let's look at China. In late October, Beijing sent a special envoy to West Asia, sort of like a peace mission. And what did it achieve? Absolutely nothing. So meddling for the sake of it never really helps. In fact, it's counterproductive. You end up alienating potential partners, like how China is doing with Israel. So you must understand and accept your limits, and India has done that. If this was South Asia, New Delhi would be more proactive. And we've seen that in Sri Lanka and Nepal, but this is West Asia. It is not India's traditional sphere of influence. So the logic is quite simple. If you can't make it better, don't make it worse. And finally, reason number 3, a big power responsibility. Almost 21,000 civilians have died in Gaza. Around 40% of them are children. You can't ignore a tragedy of this scale, especially if you're an emerging world power. So India changed its position at the United Nations General Assembly. New Delhi abstained from voting for the first ceasefire resolution. The first time it came, New Delhi abstained. But the second one, India supported. And this was on the 12th of December. 7 days later, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel dialed the Indian Prime Minister Modi. He briefed him on Israel's operations. So clearly the vote has not hurt India-Israel ties. Does it mean that strategic autonomy is working? Well, for the moment, yes, it is working, but you cannot take it for granted. India's policy is directly linked to India's performance. Its economy, the size of its population, and its strategic importance, all of it matters. If those factors keep getting better, no worries. But if they decline, it could be trouble. Here's another example of India's strategic autonomy, its relationship with Russia. It has remained solid despite pressure from the West and despite Moscow's growing proximity to China. But why are we talking about this tonight? Because India's External Affairs Minister is in Moscow. S. Jaishankar landed in Moscow yesterday. He began the trip on a nostalgic note, a visitor's pass from 1962. The minister shared it. There was a reception for Soviet cosmonauts at Moscow's Red Square, and Jaishankar attended the event as a 6-year-old in 1962. And now, more than 6 decades later, he's back in Moscow as India's foreign minister and on a more important mission. Jaishankar is filling in for the Indian Prime Minister. Prime Minister Modi was supposed to visit Russia for his annual summit with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin. He couldn't go, so he sent S. Jaishankar, who started the visit on the perfect note. Here's what he said.
If there is one constant actually in world politics, it has actually been the relationship with India-Russia.
The only constant in world politics. The choice of words is telling. India and Russia share a long history, and despite recent geopolitical pressures, India's commitment to Russia has not wavered. However, there is a need for recalibration. Progress on key diplomatic initiatives remains stalled, and Minister S. Jaishankar is trying to revive that. Today, he met Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and he was quick to spell out India's priorities. The first one is trade. Trade remains lopsided in Russia's favor, mainly because India buys Russian oil, and a lot of it. New Delhi wants to strike a balance, and Moscow is game. They plan to sign a trade deal.
We have agreed that the negotiations between India and the Eurasian Economic Union for a free trade agreement will be resumed in the second half of January this year.
A free trade pact. This includes 5 countries: Russia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Now, India and Russia will resume talks next month. There's a lot to address on that front. One of the key concerns is currency. 8 months ago, there was a setback. India and Russia wanted to trade in their native currencies, the rupee and the ruble. India paid for Russian weapons in rupees, but the effort has been stalled because Russia has a lot of Indian rupees and doesn't know what to do with them. We're talking about significant assets in rupees worth billions. Russia doesn't know how to use them. The money cannot be converted because Russia faces international sanctions. Its banking systems are cut off from the world. Plus, they have limited investment options in India and they don't buy very much from India. So they cannot use the rupees to pay for imports. Hence the large stockpile. And it's not like they did not look for solutions. Both sides were in talks. But in May this year, the conversation seems to have hit a dead end. Now, when the trade negotiations begin, they can revisit the currency issue because many more big-ticket deals are in the works, including deals in Russian weapons. And that's the second priority. Lavrov made a statement today. He said India and Russia want to make more weapons together.
We respect and we have spoken about this, the desire of our Indian colleagues to diversify ties in the area of military technical cooperation. We also understand and are ready to support their initiative to produce military products within the framework of the Make in India program.
What kind of weapons? Military aircraft. Russia isn't revealing what kind, but it won't be the first project of this nature. India's BrahMos missile was made in collaboration with Russia. Russia has also partnered with India for the Sukhoi fighter jets, tanks, armoured vehicles and shells. And this year, India and Russia began the joint production of Kalashnikov rifles. Again, these projects were delayed due to the war in Ukraine and also because of Western sanctions. But that has not hampered future engagements and new proposals. And it seems that India is still willing to be patient, even when it comes to nuclear cooperation. India and Russia have signed new agreements. This is about the Kudankulam nuclear power plant, India's largest nuclear power station. India wants to build more power units there, and Russia seems ready to help. So defense and energy are the backbone of this relationship. If the trade deal materializes, it will only deepen mutual dependence. Although India has scaled back the purchase of Russian oil, in October it fell to an 8-month low. That's because discounts from Russia fell. So India started buying less. But the larger picture remains unchanged. Later today, Jaishankar is expected to meet the Russian president as well. And today's developments only underscore Russia's importance for India. Moscow remains a time-tested friend for New Delhi. Over to Pakistan now. Just when you think you've seen it all, Pakistan surprises you again. Things are now going from bad to worse. Ask Shah Mahmood Qureshi, former foreign minister and current prisoner. Qureshi is a member of Imran Khan's party. He is also very close to the former prime minister, meaning he too is a wanted man. But last week, Qureshi got a breather. Pakistan Supreme Court granted him bail in the Sifar case. It's one of the many cases against him. He got bail. So today, Qureshi walked out of jail in Rawalpindi. He did not make it far, though. Take a look at what happened.
Hey, sir. I'm sorry.
You saw what happened. Qureshi got re-arrested outside the jail, this time in a different case. I guess it was expected, but look at the way he was arrested, dragged, manhandled and shoved into the police vehicle. And remember, we are talking about a former foreign minister, a man who represented Pakistan abroad. He's being treated like a thug. It tells you everything about Pakistani politics, but I must say, Qureshi was lucky because Imran Khan too was granted bail last week. He couldn't even reach sunlight. Chances are he's been re-arrested inside the jail. Now, Imran Khan faces some 150 cases. He can be arrested in any one of them, 150 cases. So what's his party's strategy for elections? They're betting on the courts. Today, his lawyers approached Pakistan Supreme Court and they had one demand: suspend Imran Khan's conviction in the Tosha Khana case. Now, this case involves corruption. Imran Khan is accused of stealing from the state treasury. His party says suspend that conviction. Only then can Imran Khan contest the upcoming election. And did the Supreme Court agree? Well, they said no to an immediate hearing. They also said suspending the conviction would not help. Why? Because the election ban would still remain. So Imran Khan is going to have to wait. His rivals have mixed feelings about all of this. I'm talking about Nawaz Sharif and his party, the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, PMLN. Last month, they loved the courts in Pakistan. Sharif's convictions had been overturned, so the party showered praises on the judiciary. But last week, their tone changed. They said Imran Khan was being given certificates of innocence. By whom? The same courts. I know consistency was never Pakistan's strong suit, but this is borderline funny. Either way, it's a legal drama now. The courts are on a winter holiday. Once they're back, they will hear Imran Khan's cases. It won't be easy though. There will be pressure from the Pakistan army, also a long list of charges and cases. If one doesn't stick, another will. So time is running out for Imran Khan. The poll body will release the final candidate list soon. After that, there is no return. When I say Football World Cup, which is the one team that comes to your mind? If you're a Messi fan, the answer will be Argentina. But if you're a football fan, the answer should be Brazil. It is a team that has redefined the World Cup, playing all editions and lifting the trophy a record 5 times. You can't imagine the FIFA World Cup without Brazil. Or can you? We ask because it's a possibility. Brazil is in a new dispute with FIFA. This one is over the dismissal of the president of its footballing body. And if it doesn't abide by FIFA's terms, Brazil could be banned from international competitions. Does that mean Brazil will miss the 2026 FIFA World Cup? Our next report has the answer.
In the vast tapestry of football glory, if there's one nation synonymous with the World Cup, it's Brazil. When Brazil play, the world watches. When they win, the world celebrates. And when they lose, hearts break across the globe. But what happens if Brazil don't play in the World Cup? It sounds like a bad nightmare for fans. But it could soon be a possibility. Brazil could be banned from international competitions by FIFA, the likes of the Copa America or even the World Cup. So why could Brazil be banned? The story involves the Brazilian Football Confederation, or the CBF. The body is going through some difficult times. It began with the departure of Ednaldo Rodrigues, the president of the body. Rodrigues was removed on December 7th. This was by a Rio de Janeiro court. It ruled that there were irregularities in his election, so it ordered his removal. The court has also asked for the election of a new president. But this did not go down well with FIFA. Historically, FIFA doesn't like interferences into its bodies, so it warned the CBF. If they conducted elections without FIFA's approval, Brazil could face suspension from international competitions. And we're talking about a few of them: the 2024 Copa America, the Copa Libertadores, and even the 2026 FIFA World Cup. For now, FIFA and the South American Football Authority, CONMEBOL, say they will form a commission. The matter will be discussed with Brazil on January 8th. The commission will meet stakeholders, examine the current situation, and work together to find a solution. That's what FIFA says. But if Brazil acts before that, FIFA may look at a suspension. And this isn't the first time FIFA has threatened this. In 2022, FIFA threatened to ban Tunisia. This was after the country's sports minister spoke about dissolving the Football Association. FIFA has also banned countries before. It banned both Kenya and Zimbabwe. This was due to governmental interference in football bodies. Then there was Indonesia in 2015. FIFA alleged third-party interference in the local football association. This was the same reason why it also banned Kuwait in 2016. So it has happened before. But Brazil is no Kuwait nor Indonesia. Its name echoes through the annals of World Cup history. This is a country that has lifted the cup 5 times, in 1958, 1962, 1970, 1994 and 2002. It's also the only team to compete in all World Cup editions. Pele, Zico, Ronaldo, these legends didn't just play the World Cup, they defined football itself. This is a country where football isn't just a game, it's a cultural phenomenon. So leaving the La Selecao out will be a massive jolt to football and its fans. FIFA says they hope to resolve the matter soon. Hopefully we will see the men in yellow and green return in 2026 for another shot at footballing glory.
Now let's talk about Brazil's neighbor, Argentina. It's a country in crisis. Inflation is nearing 200%. Foreign reserves are depleting fast. Simply put, Argentina's economy is sick. So the people of Argentina have hired a new doctor, Javier Milei, their new president. He believes in shock therapy. No nudges or prods, only big bang moves. One such move was announced on Tuesday. Milei is trimming down Argentina's government. Basically, he's firing public officials. More than 5,000 of them are said to be at risk. Here's how it works. A lot of public officials work on a contract basis in Argentina. Some of those contracts expire on the 31st of December, at the end of this year. Milei says he won't extend them. He won't extend those contracts. He issued a special decree on Tuesday. First, only workers hired in 2023 will be fired, but gradually those hired before this year will also be scrutinized. There are some exceptions though, like senior officials. They're safe. So are workers hired under legal quotas, for example, specially abled workers. Now, what is the idea behind this move? Simple, to save money. Argentina's government employs around 3.5 million people. That's 7.7% of their population employed by the government. Their salaries take up more than 2% of the GDP. But Milei says that is not acceptable. His plan is to sell off state-owned companies, to privatize them. So these layoffs are a precursor to that. Now, I know you have questions like, can governments really lay off workers? Have they done it before? Well, surprisingly, the answer is yes. Greece fired around 150,000 workers, public officials, 150,000. This was from 2010 to 2015. It was a condition imposed on them by lenders. If you want the money, cut the job. So that's what they did. Even the United States laid off workers. After the 2008 recession, the US government downsized. Around 750,000 jobs disappeared in 5 years, 750,000, all public officials. Argentina's neighbor Brazil is also on this list. In 2016, Brazil's economy was under pressure, so the government fired some 4,600 workers, again, all public officials. You may have noticed a trend in this list. Layoffs always follow a crisis. They're part of austerity measures, but they do raise questions about the larger trend, that of governments and jobs. It's a big deal here in India. A government job is like the holy grail. Millions of candidates often compete for a few hundred seats. It's a long shot, but people take it. So how many workers does the Indian government employ? And how does it compare to other countries? Around 20 million Indians work in government sectors. That's around 2.2% of the workforce, 20 million people. The Chinese government employs around 39 million people, which is 4.6% of their workforce. In the US, the rate is almost 7%. In the UK, 17.5%. And in Europe, 18% is the average. 18% of the workforce is employed by the government. Nordic countries have surprisingly high rates. It's around 30% in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. So if you pick 3 workers, one of them, 1 out of 3, works in the government in these countries. Of course, this raises questions. Should governments be considered a source of jobs? Should they keep adding more workers? I'm afraid it's not a yes or no question. It depends on a lot of factors, like, can your country afford it? Nordic nations have impressive per capita incomes. They also have low public debt, so clearly they can afford it. But not every country likes a big government. Many Western leaders have built careers out of opposing it. Take a look at this.
And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited.
People feel that they count for less and less. The state drains society not only of its wealth, but of initiative, of energy, the will to improve and innovate, as well as to preserve what is best.
Some say We need more of your money to expand the size and scope of government, or they would argue more of your money to balance the budget. Then there are those of me, like me in Washington, who say there's ample money in Washington to meet priorities, and the more money you have in your pocket, the better off the economy is.
So what should India do? Ideally, somewhere in the middle. We need the private sector to take the lead. India has some 500 million workers. It's impossible for the government to employ all of them, 500 million people, but that does not mean public officials are redundant. You need them to act as enablers, to attract investments, to offer services to people, and to expeditiously clear projects. If not, they're a burden. So you can't see public sector jobs as the answer to the problem. They can help the economy, but not cure it. Next on our list is Israel. And no, this story is not about the war. It's about what's happening in Israel despite the war. Today, there was a major announcement. Intel will invest $25 billion, the largest ever investment in Israel. $25 billion. Intel wants to build a new chip-making plant there. It already has a sizable presence in Israel. Intel operates 4 facilities in the country, including a manufacturing plant, which is some 25 kilometers northeast of Gaza. So this expansion is like a vote of confidence. But what is the broader sentiment like? Before the war, Israel was known for being a business-friendly destination. Has the war in Gaza changed that perception? Here's a report.
When there's war, economic concerns often take a back seat. Israel isn't an exception. The Israeli government is running a deficit. Plans are being discussed to slash expenses and raise revenues. But that hasn't stopped Israel from making a bold offer. The government has offered $3.2 billion worth of incentives to Intel. In exchange, Israel is getting its biggest investment ever, a whopping $25 billion. Intel is making a long-term bet on Israel. It already makes chips there, and now it plans to expand production. The $25 billion will buy Israel a bigger chip facility. The new plant will begin operations in 2028 and will keep running for at least 7 years. The investment deal includes a spending clause too. Intel will spend around $16 billion. This is to hire Israeli suppliers. The agreement was in the works for a while. Netanyahu had talked about it a few months ago.
If I'm not mistaken, this is the largest investment ever made in the state of Israel. This is a tremendous expression of confidence in Israel's economy and shows precisely the power of the free economy we have built here and the technological economy that is developing here.
4 months later, Israel would declare a war on Gaza. It became one of the deadliest terror attacks in decades. Israel's response is still unfolding.
This war has necessary and not easy goals to achieve. It takes place in complex territory. Therefore, the war will go on for many months and we will employ different methods to maintain our achievements for a long time.
But the war hasn't affected Intel's plans. They're still going ahead, perhaps because the incentives are too attractive to overlook. Israel isn't in a position to ignore the investors. Before the war, foreign investments in Israel fell sharply, falling by a record 60%. The global slowdown was hitting the Israeli economy hard. Israeli experts blamed the turmoil in the tech sector, rising inflation, and Netanyahu's judicial reform for the dip. The war has created more challenges. Businesses have faced boycott calls from pro-Palestinian groups. There have been protest rallies as far as the United States. The Intel deal provides a respite to Israel. It's an investment in Israel's future, but the current situation remains fraught with uncertainty.
Our next story is from Mexico. It is going the Pakistan way. And I'll explain why I say this. Yesterday, the country had a big day. A Mexicana flight took off after 13 years. Mexicana is one of the oldest airlines in the world. It was state-owned. Then it went private and finally bankrupt in 2010. Now it's back in the air. And while the return of Mexicana may seem like a cause for celebration, there's one detail that is concerning. The airline is under new management. That's the Mexican military. That's right. The army has entered the commercial airline industry. It already has a business portfolio which includes running airports, trains, managing customs, building and running hotels, and even constructing bank branches. The Mexican army does all of this. Basically, the military is taking over Mexico's economy. It doesn't bode well for its democratic credentials. If you don't believe us, just look at Pakistan to see exactly what and how much can go wrong when the military takes over. Here's a report.
Mexicana de Aviación. It's the fourth oldest airline in the world still in operation. Well, it regained that rank yesterday because it had technically ceased operations in 2010. But yesterday, a Mexicana flight took off after 13 years. It flew from the capital, Mexico City, to the resort town of Tulum. The president of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, was beaming with pride. He has grand plans for the revived airline.
We are going to consolidate this airline in the time we have left in office, and we are sure that those who will replace us will finish the job of strengthening Mexicana de Aviación.
Obrador is out in 2024. He can't stand for re-election. But his confidence in the airline's future may not be misplaced. His successor may not have a choice but to strengthen the airline, because Mexicana isn't an ordinary civilian carrier anymore. It has returned in a new form. It's now a military-run airline, owned and operated by Mexico's Secretariat of National Defense. Mexicana has joined numerous other companies that are now under the Mexican military's direct control. One recent example is the Tren Maya. It's an intercity train that runs through Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It commenced operations 2 weeks ago. The mega project cost Mexico $28 billion, and it's also owned by the Mexican military. Everywhere you look in Mexico, it seems the military is taking care of business. Yesterday's Mexicana flight took off from an airport operated by the Mexican military. The destination was Tulum, a resort town on the Caribbean coast. A few of the resorts there are also operated by the Mexican military. The armed forces also provide security for the beach resorts there. Now, you may wonder, why is this the case? Why does the Mexican military have its fingers in all these businesses? The short answer is efficiency. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador came to power in 2018. He had a lot of projects he wanted to complete in his single term. But Mexico is rife with corruption and bureaucracy. So he turned to the military. He gave them assignments and responsibilities outside their purview, with the belief that they are incorruptible. Now, the Mexican military is efficient in terms of speed. They don't waste time with formalities like bidding for contracts or begging for budgets. They don't bother with environmental clearances. They just assign the job to their preferred contractors, add the expenses to Mexico's defense budget, and let the government and courts squabble over permissions. So, no one really knows why certain contractors are chosen. No one can ask for the military's accounting. It's all hidden behind the veil of national security. Meanwhile, Mexico's defense secretary is buying luxury houses for a fraction of their cost, allegedly from defense contractors. But corruption is just the tip of the iceberg. The real danger runs far deeper. Just look at Pakistan. The country's economy is in the grip of its army. From weapons to wheat, sugar mills to stud horses, every aspect of Pakistan's economy is controlled by the armed forces. And look how well that's turned out. The country is constantly on the verge of economic collapse. Their democratic institutions are a sham. The army dictates which puppet politicians will be allowed to contest polls. and they keep leeching away resources from the country's budget. Pakistan is an army with a country instead of the other way around, and the people are suffering because of it. Mexicans should take note, or they could be in danger of becoming a Latin American Pakistan.
Speaking of potential corruption, let's take a look at what's going on in Zambia. It's a country in southern Africa, home to about 20 million people. Zambia has abundant natural resources, especially deposits of copper. So naturally, Zambia is being courted by the Chinese. Chinese businesses have invested billions in the country. They've been vying for control of the lucrative copper mines, apparently by any means necessary. And yesterday, a scandal broke out. It involved Zambia's now former foreign minister. His name is Stanley Kakubo. A video allegedly featuring him has gone viral. Let me show you the clip first.
And this 100, 200, they are 400. And then this one? 600. 600. And then the 40? 40. 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay.
Lots of cash there. You can't see any faces though, but Zambian media claims that Kakubo is one of the people in that video. He is apparently taking cash worth $50,000 from a Chinese businessman based in Zambia. It's reportedly for the sale of a mine that Kakubo owns. The total value of the mine was apparently $200,000 and a Mercedes-Benz. There were handwritten receipts as well. Now, none of this looks very official. There's still no solid evidence of corruption, but the optics are not good. It's never a good look when a politician is found with wads of cash. After this video went viral, Kakubo was summoned by Zambia's president. He resigned from the foreign minister's post later in the day. The Zambian president's office has accepted the resignation, but it has not acknowledged the reason yet. Why did he resign? The president's office has not said. Kakubo, however, put out a message on social media. He said he stepped down because, and I'm quoting, because of malicious claims circulating in the media. Apparently, he did not want the scandal distracting the Zambian government. He said he would continue to be a member of parliament and he would remain loyal to the president. He also addressed the scandal. Kakubo said it involved a transaction between his private business and a partner. So he doesn't seem to be denying the deal. Instead, he's portraying it as a completely legal one. But here's the interesting bit. He clarified that he still has good relations with the partner. Now, why would he say that? Because apparently the Chinese partners may have released this video. Kakubo allegedly tried to shortchange them. He tried to sell the same mine to another buyer as well, to the Chinese and another buyer, the same mine. This is according to local reports. So the Chinese partners were furious, and this incriminating video was then released as revenge. To add insult to injury, the Chinese businessmen apparently want a refund. They also want their Mercedes back. All of this sounds absurd. How much truth is there to these allegations? Well, that's for the courts to decide. Zambia has an anti-corruption commission. It has been urged to take up this case, but it will likely be months or even years before we get the answers. And this is just one such case. There could be more because reports say that just last year, 600 Chinese businesses invested in Zambia. They poured in some $3 billion. 600 companies, $3 billion. And China is not the only one interested in Zambia's resources. The European Union is planning to bid for mines as well. The G7 wants to build a railway line in the country. Zambia is in the middle of a bidding war. And that means there's a lot of money involved. The scope for corruption is huge. Countries like these need to stay vigilant. They must oversee leases and sales involving crucial natural resources because no one should be allowed to exploit a country for one Mercedes-Benz. For our last story tonight, let's talk about Joe Biden. The US president has had a terrible year. 2 wars, economic woes, and all-time low ratings. That's 2023 for Joe Biden. If there's anyone who wants to forget this year, it's probably Joe Biden. But will he be looking forward to 2024? It's the year of the US presidential election, and Biden needs a lifeline to remain in the White House. Will that lifeline be Taylor Swift? She's arguably the most popular person in America right now. Over half of all Americans call themselves Swifties. And experts say an endorsement from Swift could shift the political tide in the US. But will Miss Americana do it? Also, what is it about stars that they influence politics? Our next report tells you.
2023 was the year of Taylor Swift. She was Time magazine's Person of the Year. Her Eras tour earned over $1 billion. Her fans caused a mini earthquake, and wherever she went, there were only tremors. So much so that Justin Trudeau begged her to visit Canada. If Taylor Swift were an economy, she would be bigger than many countries. So when Beyoncé asks who runs the world, we can safely say it's Taylor Swift. She is a cultural phenomenon, the biggest pop star of her generation. But can she also influence elections? We ask because 2024 is the year of US presidential elections. And at this point, it could be a 2020 rematch. Biden versus Trump. Can Taylor change the way America votes? Well, there is precedence for this. Taylor Swift identifies as a Democrat. She's often talked about not speaking against Trump in 2016. In 2018, she endorsed two candidates in Tennessee, both Democrats. One of them won, the other did not. In 2020, she supported Biden's presidential bid. Many could argue the impact of her endorsements. But the Taylor Swift of 2020 isn't the Taylor Swift of today. She was a pop star back then. Today, she is a cultural icon. She has young America at her beckoning. When she speaks, her fans listen. And they listen hard. Like this post. Taylor Swift posted it in September. She asked her fans to register to vote. What happened next was unprecedented. There was a spike in registrations, the most registrations in a day since 2020. So a simple endorsement could do wonders for Biden, especially in the swing states, because while Taylor is a Democrat herself, she is extremely popular among independents and Democrats. A recent poll said she had the highest favorability rating, putting her above Biden, Trump, or any other political person in America. Nearly half of all Swifties are millennials, a voter base Biden is struggling with. So a simple shout-out could mean lines at the ballot box. Even if a fraction of her followers turn up to vote, it would mean tens of thousands of people. And that could change the tide for Biden. And it's happened before. Star power can influence elections. Take the 2008 US elections. Oprah Winfrey endorsed Barack Obama. Apparently, it helped Obama gain over 1 million votes. In 1984, Indian actor Amitabh Bachchan contested the Lok Sabha elections from Allahabad. He won with a record margin of 1,87,895 votes. Then there were the 1996 Tamil Nadu state elections. Superstar Rajinikanth was campaigning. He said, even God can't save Tamil Nadu if Jayalalitha returns to power. And just like that, Jayalalitha's AIADMK suffered a crushing defeat, winning just 4 assembly seats out of 234. So star power matters. They can really shift the tide in your favor. They can help you reach a wider audience, help you convey your message better. But what happens when they are not as politically nuanced? Take comedian Kenny Everett. He was at a Tory conference in 1983, speaking for Margaret Thatcher. It did not go so well for her, given that Everett called for bombing Russia. So what will it be for Taylor Swift? Will Taylor decide she belongs to the Democrats? Can she help Biden shake the elections blues off? Will their love story woo the voters? Or will it just be another cruel summer of campaigning for the Biden camp? Taylor Swift came to the rescue of many economies in 2023. In 2024, can she and will she do the same for Biden?
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In China, a vocational college buys an Airbus 320 for students to practice and improve their skills. In Turkey, authorities convert luxury rides of crime gangs into police cars. And cold showers may be good for health, but some people are taking it a step further. They're going for a swim at the edge of the Arctic Circle. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1911, India's national anthem, Jana Gana Man, was sung for the first time. It was at the Calcutta session of the Indian National Congress. Jana Gana Man was written by Rabindranath Tagore in 1950. It was officially declared as India's national anthem. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Adesso la cominci, tu invece sei girato, eh.